We always looked forward to spending 2 or 3 days each year on what was called a vacation. Usually we went to the beach. It took us from about 4 in the morning to 2 in the afternoon to drive either to Wilmington or to Myrtle Beach. After we got there, my father would inquire at various boarding houses to see which was the cheapest. He usually was able to get board and room for about $1 a night per person. My mother also liked to go to the Magnolia Gardens near Charleston, South Carolina. We saw the flowers, spent the night, and headed home. For me, the best part was that we usually went along with Aunt Ida and her husband, Tom Black, and their several kids, including cousin Laura, who was more like a sister to us. They lived about 4 miles down the road from us and ran a dairy of their own. The first long trip I can remember taking was to Washington, D.C., 400 miles away. Cousin Frank Black drove the car, but he did not want to spend much time sightseeing because he had to get back to his girlfriend. I think we went through the entire Smithsonian Institution, not the extensive complex it is today, in 40 minutes. We did take the time, though, to climb every one of those steps up the Washington Monument. One summer, my father and Uncle Tom Black decided to take us all, 2 carloads, to Oklahoma to visit Uncle Tom Graham and Aunt Belle and the cousins out west in Tahlequah, Oklahoma. It was a hair-raising trip. Most of the roads we traveled weren't paved. They were simply topped with gravel. It took us 2 or 3 days to drive to Oklahoma, and we had several tire blowouts on the way. One night in Arkansas, we had to stop along a desolate stretch of clay road to repair a tire. We had gotten separated from the other car, which was being driven by cousin Irvin Stafford. He had gone to school in Tahlequah and knew the country.
While my father fixed the tire, we kids waited in the quiet darkness, more than a little frightened. We thought we saw strange creatures peering out at us from behind the trees. A car came by and stopped. "Where y'all from?" the driver asked. "North Carolina," Daddy answered. "Y'all better be careful," the stranger said. "This road attracts robbers and cutthroats. You could get robbed or even killed here." My father got that flat tire fixed in record time, but it was still a hard trip for a 12-year-old. Daddy insisted on not paying more than $1 for a place to stay. Even in those days, that was cheap. Finally, we arrived in Oklahoma, headquarters of the Cherokee Nation, home for those Cherokee who had survived the terrible mark of the Trail of Tears. We had a wonderful 2 or 3 days with my uncle and his family in Tahlequah. The variety of adventures made those some of my happiest years, even though when I grew big enough to help with chores, the work was truly hard. To this day, I can clearly remember the hours working in Mother's garden, guiding the plow and following the hind end of a mule to put the fertilizer on after the seeds had been sown. In the spring, summer, and fall, we had many acres of corn, wheat, rye, and barley, as well as the vegetable acreage, and Melvin, the McMackins, and I all worked in those fields. When that Big Ben alarm clock went off at 2:30 in the morning, I wanted to slam it to the floor and burrow back under the covers. But heavy footsteps thudded in the quiet hallway outside my upstairs bedroom, where I had taken my apple and the white tomcat to bed with me seemingly only minutes before. That sound told me that my father was on the move and expected me to hustle down the hill to rouse Pedro, one of the hired hands. Besides that, I knew there would be no breakfast until after we had finished the milking. I rolled out in a hurry. Joe McCall, another of our workers, would usually call the cows in with his wooey, wooey, wooey. Each one headed instinctively for her own stall, where we would fasten the stanchions around her neck and, if she was one of the rambunctious ones, put kickers, restraining chains, on her hind legs. I would then set my 3-legged stool and tin milk pail on the floor under her working end, press my head against her warm belly, and get to work on the udder faucets, trying not to get hit in the eyes with her switching tail while I milked.
I repeated the process in 20 stalls each morning, and each afternoon, as soon as I got home from school, I milked the same 20 of our cows again. The job took my flexible fingers about 2 hours, a very commendable rate of around 5 minutes per cow. That was followed by wielding a shovel to clean out the fresh, warm manure and by generally straightening things up inside the cow barn.
The other hands and I brought in fresh hay from the hay barn next door, or silage from one of our 2 silos, and refilled the feed troughs. Carrying the 5-gallon milk cans over to the milk processing house where my Uncle Clyde worked was a favorite ritual for me. In the earliest years, before I was old enough to help with the milking, I watched the muscular men settle those huge silvery cans down into the clear water of the spring to get them cool before bottling the milk for delivery to the homes in town. I especially loved to watch Reese Brown work. He was the foreman on our place for 15 years, perhaps the highest paid farmhand in Mecklenburg County, at $3 to $4 a day, which made a few other farmers critical of my father. Reese was one of Daddy's best personal friends, a black man who had served with distinction as an Army sergeant during World War I. He had great intelligence. Physically, he was one of the strongest men I ever knew, with a tremendous capacity for working hard. Everyone respected him, and I thought there was nothing Reese did not know or could not do. If I did something he thought was wrong, he did not mind correcting me. He also taught me to respect my father and was almost like another uncle to me. I used to play with his children and eat his wife's fabulous buttermilk biscuits in the tenant house that was their home. With the whole milking process finished about 5:30, it was time to eat in the warm and appetizing breakfast room. While we worked in the barns, Mother chopped wood for the stove, did household tasks, and cooked for the hungry men. Now, with my sister Catherine and the maid helping her, she ladled out grits and gravy, fresh eggs, ham or bacon, and hot homemade rolls, a traditional farm breakfast, with all the milk we non-coffee drinkers wanted. Susie Nicholson, the black woman who worked for Mother for 20 years, was like a second mother to us children. It was a busy but easygoing time.
After all my heavy labor in the fresh air at daybreak, followed by Mother's good food, I was ready for almost anything, except school. With only 3 or 4 hours of sleep some nights, I often felt tired in my classes. I think fatigue contributed to my course grades being as poor as they were. I had made mostly A's when I was in elementary school, but in high school, I was at the C level. Maybe that was why I failed French in the 10th grade. Every day the following summer, classmate Winston Covington, whom I called Wint, and I had to drive over in his car to spend 2 hours with a teacher who sat us down and tutored us in French. For that matter, the classroom was traumatic on my very first day in elementary school. Mother had packed my lunch and told me I was to eat it at recess. She did not say there would be 2 recesses. The first came at 10 in the morning and lasted only 10 minutes. By the time the bell rang for us to return to class, I had finished my lunch. The second, longer recess was the official lunchtime, and I had nothing to eat. I was mighty hungry by dismissal time at 3 o'clock and must have rushed out of the building. The principal did not like my haste and yanked my ear in reprimand. At home, from my earliest years, Mother encouraged me in the habit of reading. The exploits of Robin Hood and Sherwood Forest entranced me. I read the whole Tom Swift series and the Rover Boys. Among my favorite adventure reading were the Tarzan books. They came out every few months. I could hardly wait for the next one to be issued, and my mother would always buy it for me. In the woods and back of our house, I tried to imitate Tarzan's vine-swinging antics and distinctive yell, much to the amusement of Catherine. Mother saw to it that there was more serious reading, too. Before I was 10, she had made me memorize the Westminster Presbyterian Shorter Catechism. Once I was visiting an aunt who ordered us to spend some time reading the Bible. In about 10 minutes, I went back to her and boasted, I just read a whole book in the Bible. She thought I was a remarkable boy. I had discovered the Epistle of Jude, the shortest book in the New Testament. 1 page. Mother also prodded me to read the Book of Knowledge, an encyclopedia.
Dr. W.B. Lindsay, the minister in our church, was a sweet and godly man. He reminded me of a mortician, though, because as far as I knew, he never told a humorous story. I found his sermons biblical but boring. Still, I shared our family's respect for him. He was what I supposed a saint should be. Discouraging thought, since I felt so far from sainthood. Dr. Lindsay's wife, well, I could have given her a cheer. She sat in the front pew and shook her watch at her husband when it was time for him to quit preaching. One day, though, in vacation Bible school, I threw a Bible across the room to someone who wanted one. Mrs. Lindsay, looming like a locomotive, steamed over to me and boomed,
Don't you ever do that again. That book is God's Word. There was not much about Dr. Lindsay's church to make it lively for me, not even in the youth group. We sang only metrical psalms, that is to say, only hymns taken from the Book of Psalms, in the services on the Sabbath. We were too strict to say Sunday. We did not always get back to church for the evening meeting. It was about a 10-mile trip in the Model A Ford over 2 parallel mud ruts. To make up for that, Mother liked to gather us around her to listen to a Bible story on Sunday afternoons before the milking. One unpleasant complication about high school was a change in the school system that required us country kids to transfer from the Woodlawn School to the Sharon School at the edge of town. We newcomers glared at the students who were already there, and they glared back. It took at least 6 months for us to get adjusted to each other. That first year at Sharon, I got into more fistfights and wrestling matches than in all the rest of my school days put together, and a couple of times I got beaten. Immediately after school each day, I returned home for the afternoon milking, putting on my old clothes and heading right out to the barn. My father usually had at least 2 or 3 men helping us, and I would get to talk to them and hear all the events of the day and swap stories with them. Then after chores, there was baseball practice and homework and church activities and get-togethers with my friends. During summer vacations, there was no more leisure. In addition to the regular milking and other chores on the farm, I had to help our delivery man, Tom Griffin, on our dairy route in Charlotte, which was then a city of more than 50,000. He was always a lot of fun, entertaining me with tales of incredible encounters with some of his customers. Some of those stories would be rated R or X today. I remember delivering 4 quarts of milk every day to the home of Randolph Scott. He would later become a famous film actor. As adults, he and I occasionally played golf together, and I preached at his funeral.